Police are investigating the connection of the Hollywood Hills burglaries. If you have any information, please contact the LAPD.
The year is 2008. Obama is about to be elected president, Mamma Mia is about to perform a cultural reset, and some of Hollywood's brightest stars are having no idea they're about to be the victims of one of the most famous burglary rings of all time. The Bling Ring is a movie about a real string of burglaries that took place between 2008 and 2009. The movie came about an article about the burglaries called "The Suspects Wore Louboutins." These weren't just normal burglaries though. The victims were some of the most famous people in the world at the time, including Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, and Orlando Bloom. If that wasn't enough to make this interesting, the crimes were committed by a group of teens who got away with their crimes for almost a year, even though they were caught on security cameras multiple times and bragged about their crimes all the time. The real-life Bling Ring was a group of 7 teens and young adults, most of whom grew up in Calabasas, California. Calabasas is pretty well known as somewhere that celebrities such as Kylie Jenner and Justin Bieber like to settle down in big white mansions. Their location gave the Bling Ring perfect access to celebrity homes, and consistently being surrounded by the rich and famous gave this group an idea for the perfect crime. The Bling Ring was active between October 2008 and April 2009. 7 months doesn't sound like a long time, but it was enough for them to cause a lot of damage. $3 million worth. They stole diamonds from Paris Hilton, custom fit jeans from Audrina Partridge, a Rolex watch collection from Orlando Bloom, and that doesn't even cover half of it. They stole so many clothes and accessories from Rachel Bilson that they actually tried to sell a lot of it on the Venice Beach boardwalk just to get rid of some of it. Of the 7 members, 5 of the Bling Ring were barely out of high school when they began their robbing spree. The ringleader of the group, Rachel Lee, was brought up by her single, successful mother in Calabasas. Despite her privileged upbringing, Rachel had a reputation as a troublemaker in high school, which had her expelled from Calabasas High School. She attended Indian Hills High School, an alternative school, until she graduated and received a creative arts scholarship. It was at Indian High she would meet another member of the Bling Ring, Nicholas Prugo. Nicholas, more commonly known as Nick, was also expelled from Calabasas High, but he and Rachel didn't become friends until they were both transferred to Indian Hills. The two bonded over their interests in fashion and celebrities. Nick saying that Rachel was obsessed with reality television. Even though Nick is thought to be as guilty as Rachel was in the burglaries, he was known as a quiet, shy guy who claims he was always reluctant to commit the crimes he was involved in. After befriending Rachel and being accepted into the rest of her group, Nick got hooked on drugs. Even though the ring was below the legal drinking age of 21, they really liked to party and spent a lot of times out at clubs and bars. Nick started funding his addiction by stealing from his parents, later encouraging Rachel to help him break into cars. Their first major heist took place in the summer of their 10th grade, when they broke into an acquaintance's home in Woodland Hills, as Nick knew they would be out of town. The other 3 girls in the Bling Ring were Diana Tomeo, Courtney Ames, and Alexis Neers. Alexis claimed she had very little involvement with the Bling Ring and only admitted to taking part in the robbery of Orlando Bloom. Like Nick, Alexis had a long history of addiction, which allegedly motivated her to take place in the robberies. Diana Tomeo looked like she had a bright future ahead of her before the Bling Ring. She was student body president at Indian Hills, voted best smile, and got a future teacher scholarship after she graduated. But like the rest of the ring, she was far from a perfect girl. She was known for getting into fights, and according to Nick, her entire wardrobe was made up of items she stole. Courtney was an old friend of Rachel's from Calabasas High, and even though they were at different schools, they stayed very involved with each other. It was through Courtney that the rest of the group met Jonathan Ajar, Courtney's boyfriend at the time, and Roy Lopez Jr. Jonathan Ajar was known locally as Johnny Dangerous. He was a well-known ex-con and worked as a bouncer at one of the clubs the Bling Ring liked to go to. He was the one that let them into the club when they were still underage and would later be recruited by Courtney as someone to sell the items they stole from celebrity homes. Although he never took part in the burglaries himself, he did involve his friend Roy Lopez by getting him to help resell items. Roy is known to have taken part in robbing Paris Hilton and may be part of the reason they were caught. The first victim of the Bling Ring is thought to be Paris Hilton. Nick and Rachel found Paris's address online and they went to the house thinking she would have left her door unlocked. Unfortunately for Paris, not only was the front door unlocked, but she'd left a spare key under the mat that would have let the two into the house anyway. The craziest part about these burglaries is that most of the victims were robbed more than once and had so much stuff they didn't notice when the Bling Ring looted their clothes, money, and jewelry. It was reported that they broke into Paris's home at least 4 more times after Nick and Rachel visited it themselves. Allegedly, Rachel kept the spare key to Paris's front door and had it on a keychain. Paris didn't notice she'd been burglared until Roy stole a Louis Vuitton handbag that contained $2 million worth of Paris's jewelry. At that point, Paris contacted the police, and it quickly became known that there was a gang of serial burglars in the Hollywood Hills. You may be asking yourself, how did the bling ring get away with this for so long? Well, it's pretty simple. You'd think most celebrities would have 24/7 security with how expensive their possessions are, but according to celebrity security expert Mark Chinapin, celebrities are definitely easy targets. Most celebrities are just like most people. They don't think anything will happen to them until it does. A lot of the homes burglared by the bling ring had unlocked doors and windows. One time, Diana was able to crawl through a doggy door and let the rest of the ring into the house. Reality star Audrina Partridge was one of the few victims to take action straight away after she was burglared. She managed to catch the bling ring on CCTV as they stole from her on February 22, 2009. She released the footage to her own blog, which was quickly picked up by news outlets, but shockingly, the ring wasn't identified from the video. The bling ring would go on to steal from Rachel Bilson, Orlando Bloom, Miranda Kerr, Brian Austin Green, Megan Fox, and Lindsay Lohan. According to Nick, Rachel totally idolized Lindsay, and breaking into her home was the biggest conquest as she saw Lindsay as her biggest style icon. However, by the time they broke into Lindsay's home, the ring had become cocky and were so convinced they would never be caught that they openly bragged about their crimes when they were at clubs and parties. They were so comfortable breaking into these homes, in fact, that Rachel used Rachel Bilson's bathroom during their burglary of her home. The bling ring's reign of terror came to an end when they were caught on cameras at Lindsay Lohan's home. As with Audrina Partridge, Lindsay knew straight away she'd been robbed, and she released the CCTV footage to news outlets in the hopes that the thieves would be caught. And they were. A secret source tipped off police that Nick and Rachel were involved in the burglaries. To this day, no one knows who ratted the ring out, but it brought them down completely. When he was arrested, Nick quickly caved and confessed everything to the police, even telling them about crimes they weren't aware of yet because the victims had yet to notice anything was missing from their homes. When asked why they did it, Nick said they never discussed why they did it. "We just did it," Nick said. "I know it sounds dumb, but Rachel wanted the clothes. I was just following Rachel. I loved her almost like a sister." In the end, most of the bling ring pleaded no contest for their crimes and received jail terms and probation. Diana also receiving an order for 60 days of community service. The heaviest sentence was handed to Rachel, who was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but managed to get out after serving less than 2. 10 years on from the rise and fall of the bling ring, it may surprise you to hear most of the former members are doing their best to stay out of the limelight these days. Rachel, Courtney, Roy, and Diana try to have as little to do with the media as possible. The only one to speak out since their convictions was Diana, who has since found God and now has a career in nutrition and fitness. Nick and Johnny Dangerous have had a colorful few years. Johnny seems to have changed very little since he served less than a year in prison for possession of narcotics and a stolen firearm. Nick has probably been doing the worst out of the whole group since the bling ring disbanded. In 2016, Nick pled guilty to a misdemeanor of stalking and received 3 years of probation, as well as a 350 hours of community service. Alexis Neers is one of the few members that remains active online. Since she was caught stealing from Orlando Bloom with the bling ring, Alexis has come clean about her addiction to drugs and managed to get sober. She is now married and has a daughter. When discussing her experiences with burglary, addiction, and her reality show, she said, "I believed that in some weird way, this whole thing with the bling ring, this whole reality show, is going to give me an opportunity to help people." Whatever the ex-members of the bling ring are doing now, I hope they make good choices in the future and learn from their mistakes. How do you think the movie compares to the real story? I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the future videos. Bye!